Imagine receiving an old, seemingly innocent doll as a gift, only to discover that it has a dark, sinister past. What would you do if this doll began to act on its own, terrifying you and everyone around you? This is the true story of a haunted doll that didn't just sit on a shelf. It changed its owner's life forever. But the real question is the doll really haunted, or is something even darker at play? In the mid-1990s, a woman named Andrea received an unusual gift from her grandmother. It was an old porcelain doll with delicate features and a painted smile. Andrea's grandmother told her it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. The doll had been in their family for decades and had been lovingly cared for. At first glance, the doll seemed like a quaint, harmless decoration. But something about the doll seemed off. Andrea couldn't shake the eerie feeling that it was watching her. She brushed it off as her imagination until the strange things began to happen. At first, the odd occurrences were subtle. At night, Andrea would hear faint tapping sounds coming from the living room where the doll sat on a shelf. Thinking it was the wind or the house settling, she didn't give it much thought. But the noises grew louder, and the doll seemed to change positions on its own. Andrea began to notice that the doll's smile would appear wider, almost as if it was mocking her. Its eyes, which were a dark shade of blue, seemed to follow her around the room, no matter where she stood. One evening, Andrea returned home from work to find the doll sitting in a different position, facing the door instead of its usual spot, facing the window. This was the moment when Andrea started to question whether the doll was truly moving on its own, or if something was far more sinister at play. The situation escalated one night when Andrea was alone in her home. She was sitting in her living room reading a book when she heard the distinct sound of footsteps coming from behind her. Startled, she turned around to see the doll sitting upright on the shelf, but it was no longer in the same position. Its body was turned at an unnatural angle, and its arms were raised as though it had been trying to get out of its chair. Terrified, Andrea grabbed the doll and placed it back in its original spot. She tried to convince herself that it was simply her mind playing tricks on her. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, things began to get even weirder. Andrea started to have vivid, unsettling dreams about the doll. In her dreams, it would whisper to her in a voice that sounded eerily like her own, urging her to do things she couldn't understand. These dreams began to feel more like nightmares, and the sense of dread in her waking hours grew stronger. One evening, while she was eating dinner, Andrea noticed that the doll's eyes appeared to be glowing. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, but the glow was still there. Panicked, she ran to the living room to grab the doll. When she touched it, a sudden wave of cold energy surged through her body, sending chills down her spine. From that moment, the doll seemed to take on a life of its own. Andrea began hearing the same tapping sounds at night, only now they were louder, like something trying to break through the walls. The doll's smile grew wider, its eyes appeared to darken, and Andrea became certain that it wasn't just a doll, it was something malevolent. Andrea, desperate for answers, contacted paranormal investigators. She didn't know if the doll was cursed, possessed by a spirit, or if something even darker had attached itself to the object. The team arrived and conducted several investigations in Andrea's home. During one of the sessions, as they attempted to communicate with the spirit, the investigators claimed to have captured a chilling EVP recording. The voice was unmistakable, a whisper that said, "Help me. Get out." As the investigation continued, the team uncovered something unsettling. They learned that the doll originally belonged to a woman named Beatrice, who had tragically passed away in the early 1900s. Beatrice had been known for her strong belief in the supernatural and had reportedly performed various occult rituals to communicate with the dead. It was believed that Beatrice's spirit had become trapped in the doll, unable to find peace. But there was more. According to local legend, Beatrice had been a witch who had made a pact with something far darker, a powerful entity that now controlled the doll. It was this malevolent force that was said to have attached itself to the doll over the years. As Andrea's life began to unravel, she became determined to rid herself of the doll. She tried everything from moving it to different rooms to locking it away in a box, but nothing worked. The haunting grew worse, and it seemed like the doll's influence was becoming stronger. One night, in a last-ditch effort to rid herself of the doll, Andrea set it outside, hoping that removing it from her house would end the torment. But as soon as she stepped outside, the doll was gone. It had mysteriously appeared back inside her home, once again in the same spot. Desperate, Andrea contacted a spiritual medium who specialized in curses. The medium performed a ritual to break the doll's connection to the dark entity. During the ceremony, the room grew cold, and a loud, unexplained noise rang out. The doll's eyes turned completely black for a brief moment. The medium was able to successfully perform the ritual, and from that point forward, the strange occurrences stopped. Even though Andrea finally felt peace and the doll seemed to no longer have any power over her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left behind. She eventually had the doll locked away in a secure, undisclosed location, hoping that its malevolent presence would never find her again. The haunting of the porcelain doll left its mark on Andrea's life in more ways than one. Though she had reclaimed her home and her sanity, she would never forget the eerie presence that had once invaded her life. What do you think? Was the doll truly haunted, or was there something more sinister at play? Could a dark spirit or malevolent force have attached itself to the doll, or is there a hidden truth behind this mysterious object? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life horror stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the supernatural.